There's been yet another death of an individual who was held in Border Patrol custody. This time it was a transgender woman by the name of Johana Medina Leon. The death of Leon, who's 25 years old, follows that of Roxsanna Hernandez, a 33-year-old Honduran transgender woman whose 2018 in custody death sparked protests and calls for an investigation. Hernandez died of a rare disorder that developed quickly because of AIDS. Now, in the case of Medina Leon, she had asked for asylum at the border on April 11th and was detained in a private detention facility in New Mexico, where advocacy groups say transgender and gay detainees receive poor medical care and are subjected to abuse. Now, ICE has reported 5 in-custody deaths since October. To give you more details on Medina Leon, she was from El Salvador. She was fleeing violence from El Salvador because of her transgender status, and she died Saturday at an El Paso hospital. And by the way, she had asked for asylum, and she was granted asylum. There was a case there, again, because of her status as a transgender woman and the unbelievable violence that continues to take place in El Salvador.
And I think it's important to know because this happens often. She wasn't released officially from ICE custody until she was admitted to the hospital.
That's right.
And I feel like we see that in a lot of these stories.
Yeah.
They are in need of being detained until all of a sudden they're too sick to be there. And it's like, oh, okay, actually we're releasing them.
And as we've said in previous stories where there have been more deaths of children in some cases in Border Patrol custody, part of the issue is, yes, there is an influx of people seeking asylum at the border, but at the same time, rather than look to policies that would do something about these overcrowded detention facilities, the Trump administration has actually implemented policies that exacerbate the problem. So for instance, when you approach undocumented immigration from a very punitive perspective, some of the sponsors that would come forward and take custody of these children while they undergo their, asylum seeking process are deterred from coming forward because many of them might be undocumented themselves.
And that's the point.
Right.
That's the point. And you said just the words that you use, there is an influx of these people and it's like, you know what, let's stop right there. People.
Yes.
They're people and they're not being treated like it. The cruelty is the entire motivation.
And they think, well, look, the zero tolerance policy where they were ripping kids away from their parents was meant to be a deterrent. And guess what? It wasn't. They thought their cruelty would prevent other people from trying to come into the country, and it didn't. And the reason why it didn't is because the cruelty they're facing in their own countries is so horrible. They're worried about losing their lives in their own countries, which is why they're taking this massive risk. They're risking their own lives while they make this journey to the United States. Right. They're going to the ports of entry in a lot of cases, and they're asking for asylum. They're going through a long-standing legal process. And the Trump administration doesn't want to follow the law. And by the way, if you don't like the law, if you don't like the way the asylum process works, you should really think about who you're electing because Congress isn't doing anything about comprehensive immigration reform. And I'm not just talking about the asylum seeking process, I'm talking about comprehensive immigration reform that's desperately needed. This is something that has support on both sides of the aisle. Now, of course, there are some who are, vicious toward undocumented immigrants, and I'm not trying to give them credit, but our immigration laws do need to be looked at, and there's been complete inaction when it comes to Congress. And then at the same time, you have the Trump administration deciding
just making stuff up.
Just making stuff up on the spot. We don't want to follow the laws. It's out of control and people are literally losing their lives right now as a result of that.
Yeah, this is horrifying because, and of course it was never going to actually be a deterrent because the reason they're here is because they're worried, they're fearing for their lives.
Yes.
So on one hand you have death and people aren't traveling here, first class on Delta, drinking wine, sipping champagne. No, it's a horrible journey for a lot of people, but they're willing to risk that.
Right.
For their children, for their own safety. And there's just so many people that are so heartless. It's just, I don't know. I can never get past that.
And David Dayan, who was on our show this week, brought up a really great point. A lot of these detention facilities that undocumented immigrants and detainees are put in are run by privately owned facilities. And privately owned facilities have one thing in mind at all times: to turn a profit. And the way that they turn a profit is by cutting costs and not giving these detainees adequate care.
Right.
And this is the reason why we have the problem that we have. The facilities are overcrowded because of Trump's policies in an effort to deter immigration, and because of the fact that we're utilizing these privately owned detention facilities. But instead of doing something to actually show that you value human life, the Trump administration is doing the exact opposite, while simultaneously claiming that these abortion bans are done in an effort to protect human life. No, it's complete hypocrisy and it's disgusting.
On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.